Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's quite different again to meet in such an assembly after 1.5 years of time where this was unable. I'd like to take you along a journey today, a journey of the ZF Friedrichshafen AG. What is focusing us in 21? What are the topics for the future? And I say it's a journey, of course, because we are developing. We're developing into the next strategic direction, which is called the next generation mobility. And here, of course, we've defined focal points for the cooperation, focal points that I will introduce you to, and then I will also look a little at supply chain management, and I believe we all have plenty of current topics up our sleeve, and I've been part of the board since 2012, responsible for material management at a ZF Group, also responsible for the industrial business and also for the commercial vehicle business, especially after the takeover of WAPCO that also falls under my brief. Well, if you take a look at the ZF Group, then you can see here that pyramid behind me, our targets, our aim. We've got about 50,000 employees at 271 sites in 42 countries worldwide. Our revenue in 2020 was, of course, affected and impacted by Corona at 32.6 billion. We made in 2020 the takeover of WAPCO in 2020 helped us essentially to have competence in the area of technology of commercial vehicles, in the area of bus and trailers increased for the group, and we are investing per year about 7% in R&D, which is also our focal point as a foundation company to keep developing as and remain a technology trailblazer in the Tier 1 utility and mobility industry. You can see that here on the pyramid, our strategic aim. We're counting on staking on e-mobility, on safety, as it says here. And we also, are counting on all the issues that the automotive industry, the OEMs, the supply technology and industry is requiring of us. And when it comes to passenger vehicles, utility, commercial and bus vehicles, that's where we have our exposure. The technology fields are, as you see them here, of course, one area amongst the drive technology, that's vehicle motion control, meaning we integrate, so to say, our components, braking, steering systems into one unified system, into what we call integrated safety. That's a second island, a second technology domain, anything to do with safety. Of course, with the acquisition of THV, we were able to also have the safety technology in airbag and retaining systems on board. Then automated driving, of course, an issue for the future. Here we are very much on level 2 plus automated driving, passenger vehicles, but also when it comes to transportation systems. And the electric mobility, of course, something everybody's talking about these days. Or you could say differently, ZF electrifies everything from, a construction vehicle all the way through to buses and also passenger cars. Digitalization is what really connects all these domains. And one focal point also for us is also software development for this, and this of course paired and coupled with software hubs, for example, as we set them up in India and the likes. Now, of course, it's our claim that in the electrification we want to be absolutely at the very front of the pack, and I think transformation is something everybody talks about. As Tier 1 and, of course, as a transmission producer where we're well known, we need to transform ourselves. I mean, there was a necessity in 2015 when we took over THW, where we took over the brake systems for the cars and got them on board, the safety systems, and then in 2020 with WAPCO, as we took over WAPCO with 7 billion in price, where we took the brakes and the steering now also into our portfolio for utility and commercial vehicles, meaning we electrify everything. And as you see here, forecasts also indicate that by 2030 we will have more electrified vehicles and will sell them than conventionally powered, combustion engine powered vehicles. There's a number of scenarios here envisaged. We've got scenarios from a host of different corporate consultancies and companies. Our scenario here was essentially influenced by battery capacity, by battery price development, but also extension of the charging infrastructure, so all issues that you are well familiar with. The political conditions should not be forgotten either, however, because within the course of 2021 we have seen changes in this environment. You will have heard that in July of 2021 the European Commission and presented its plans for climate protection under the title Fit for 55 and Fit for 55. It means that by the year 2030, at least 55% of CO2 emissions must have been cut in comparison to 1990. And these stipulations, of course, also determine and will, of course, be indicative of when the combustion engine will come to an end, and we believe it's something around the year 2035 when combustion engine will be phased out. So electric mobility is something that we're counting on, as said Ev, but at the same time also hybrid vehicles is something we're counting on. And of course, this development also indicates that in future, obviously, we need to be ready now to make electrification in the cars something that we can co-shape. As I just outlined, there's a much higher demand for electrification. Of course, as you will also have seen over the last weeks and months, that after electrification, after e-powertrains, and at the IAA in December, we presented a construction kit system, a modular system, where in a so-called e-drive kit, we can provide everything that is necessary to have a drivetrain for a passenger car electrified, but also, of course, in other vehicles. So this consistent construction kit, or this modular approach, helps us to generate savings thanks to the integration. And of course, all new electric drivetrains of the e-drive kit will thus generate substantial improvements in the energy density, but also in the consumption, and with that also in the range of these electric-powered vehicles. So amongst all the KPIs of this kit, you can see one, that it is of primary importance for us, namely the 50% reduction. And why 50% of the reduction in the development times for e-drives? Well, we know because if we're not on board now, we won't be on board in future. So this transformation accelerates development times, means that these cars need to be ready for the market. So we are counting very much that by the integration of transmission, electric motor, inverter and software, we can provide one e-drive system that here can be provided from us as OEM, and that we thereby can score the extra points that we need. But of course, all of this needs to be done at a greater speed, with a higher and better integration, but also, of course, with a reduction in development time without in any way compromising the required quality. We are system provider, which means, as I just said, we are looking at the entire drivetrain in its holistic setup. We integrate innovation components like e-Connect, which means we've got an electrified add-on version for all-wheel powered cars, and these are also issues that we of course provide software for, that we can integrate thanks to our software in the entire vehicle. That's something that customers of course realize and notice, that with these software-based solutions, they are not only achieving a better and deeper integration of sensors, actuators and the likes, but they also allow them to network the different systems much better, and that brings, as I already mentioned, allows it to achieve considerable achievements in performance. And that means if you look at the distance speedometer, that can now have up to 30% more energy efficiency thanks to the software integration and the infrastructure with the various control algorithms we provide. Advantage is, of course, bigger range, longer battery life and the likes. So, to actually pick up speed in electric mobility, we really pursue the entire holistic strategy, which means the plug-in hybrid for us is just as important as a transition technology as the battery electric vehicle. And of course, you know that at our site in Saarbrücken, we have about, 10,000, 11,000 transmissions that we're building at the moment, from an 8-speed conventional transmission that you will get and find with many customers or OEMs. And here we are transforming that 8-speed transmission, thanks to the hybrid technology, to that so-called integrated e-drive. And we'll do so globally because the 8-speed transmission is built in USA, in Grey Court today, and in Shenyang in China. And that will be also something that we then globally have to transform in order to make sure that the successes in the e-drives can be globally provided to our customers across the globe. So what's the significance of the hybrid system for your classic driver in everyday mobility? Well, with our new concept that we will be presenting next year with the so-called EV+, we will achieve a range of 150k that you can drive the car purely electric, so that's substantially more than today, where it's anywhere between 70 or 50 to 70 kilometers. And with that higher range, I think you can realize about 80% of all the classic drives. I mean, in Germany, we've got that average of 88% of all commuters drive no more than 100 kilometers per day. And that means with such a combined hybrid vehicle as a plug-in hybrid, you can certainly manage and can certainly implement electric mobility without having to be afraid of any further range possibilities of the car, because you still have a combustion engine on board in order to drive extended ranges with the same car. Now, all of this, so much on electric mobility. Before I now switch over to autonomous driving, autonomous mobility. With that journey, you will already see that how all of this really falls into place in the next few years and how things will change massively in the upcoming years. Now, we at ZF, we're counting, as I said earlier, on software. We're also counting on software development as much as in the hardware development. We've got a collaboration, you see here, with NVIDIA. Our high-performance computer, the central computing unit, allows us, as you see here, a much better performance with a lot more functions that will help us in the safety, efficiency, and the comfort of the vehicle. This high-performance calculator, you see it here on the data, makes and contributes that in future, both in the passenger car as well as in commercial vehicles, you can have a standardized, I'd say, very performant supercomputer source. That will then mean that when you look at the integration of the actuators in the cars, we can score the extra point and will actually be quite important. Here, what we can do together with WABCO in the commercial vehicle portfolio, and you see that next to transmission, next to the conventional ZF technologies provided by ZF, for example, also chassis elements, we were able now, for buses, the steering and the likes, we were able to provide all the other components, steering, camera, radar, and the like. So with these intelligent components, the sensors, the dampers, we can have a complete system together with a park distance, with a drive distance system on board, have that provided and provided to the OEMs. And here, of course, also you will find that our Pro AE, our supercomputer, can be deployed and is being deployed, and we are already negotiating with various customers as of today to develop them still further. This high-performance computer is conceptualized in such a way that for the software-defined vehicles, it can be the basis of the future for the new electric and electronic architectures. I mean, you will read time and again that there's a new vehicle architecture upcoming in the years 24-26, and that means the smaller ECUs might just vanish and it will all be amalgamated into the central computer, and that means you need that highly performant units, and we are ready for this. We're ready for this with starting a production in quite sizable volume numbers in the year 2024. And that, of course, is, shall I say, a milestone for us at ZF. If you know, of course, where we come from here as cog and wheel producer, and now we're transforming the entire company towards, I would say, from the history into the future of software development, and also with that hardware development, but also integrating these various components into fully fledged systems. Another example is, 2 years ago, we acquired the company To Get There. They produce shuttle buses already worldwide in operation, and with, of course, that shuttle, you can replace around about 20 passenger vehicles because it provides about 20 seating and standing places on board. It's a transport system that we will develop together with To Get There. We're talking with the municipalities and cities around the world, and think this is something that can be realized in Friedrichshafen or Passau together with ZF, as well as in other cities. And as I said, we're working here with the so-called mobility service providers, that is the mobility operators like communalities, municipalities, and at the end of the day, that next to the vehicles, we also not just provide the vehicle, but the maintenance, the interval, and the software of these vehicles. So that is also an equally new approach that I definitely will see heralding in the future, so that mobility within the cities can be aligned to what's coming in the future. Here, another example, when it comes to software and digitalization, what is an essential element in safety, as I said earlier? Adopt is something that is a basis in our portfolio for a digital driver assistance system. Namely, when you look at the highly automated utility and commercial vehicles, we can increase stability and the safety that you need. For example, if you take distance assist and you have full braking operation, it uses data, amalgamates them, KE-based, and then actuates steering and braking. And with these components, you have, as a Tier 1 supplier, an extra value that you can offer, that you can then upscale all the way through to a level 4 autonomous driven vehicle, so that the car can, as I say, be kept on track, as I would call it, and also on a slippery road, on a lane change. All of this can be done safely and soundly. So Adopt Control, also developed out of WAPCO, we keep developing further to be deployed for the commercial vehicle unit and area. And I'm sure it's going to take up a position that we imagine when it comes to integrating the various systems. The third aspect next to electric mobility, autonomous driving, is of course sustainability. And this is something that I'd also like to present, because this year only, we as ZF have been positioning ourselves here quite clear. Here you can see it, it's part and parcel of our strategy pyramid, the strategy for the next generation mobility. And a key focal point here is that we've included a new function together with the environmental health and safety unit. And why did we do so? Well, because of course we are driven here and pressurized by our customers to go in this direction, but we also have the same interest. You all know the issues that keep us awake in the supply chain, human rights issues and other issues where we want to keep up the transparency that is required from us. And we've got the so-called Green Power Roadmap. That means it shows us that by 2040 we will be climate neutral. Want to be climate neutral by 2040. And of course, here we are 10 years ahead of what's called the Paris Climate Accord. So sustainability for us is commitment, a commitment in which we are also asked to document it in our annual reports. And we are focusing here all the way up to 2030 to bring carbon emissions down by 80% in comparison to 1990. So we're focusing on Scope 1 and on Scope 2. And in our supplier chain, we're the ones who have to master the responsibility, and that means many, many things will become necessary all the way through that in 2 weeks' time. And our supplier day, we will also, of course, take our supplier structure on board, because we already know from the OEMs, the Tier 1s and Tier 2s, that with the new awards of contracts, we have to provide proof of documentation that where we stand in their supply chain when it comes to our own carbon footprint. So we've defined the roadmap for these three areas, for the plants, for the supply chain, and for the products. And these are the targets for 2030 that I already mentioned. We want to increase the efficiency by 20% for our plants. We have for each plant clear targets. How? Of course, we will also need investments for this, what we want to achieve here. Then we look at the supply chain, and of course know that when you look at steel, electronics and plastics and aluminum, here there are huge challenges ahead of us that will require massive transformations. And you look at steel production, then of course you know this can only be done in future electrically, but that means where will that power come from? Is that green power? So we all need to start, and if we don't start, well, we won't get anywhere. Then you won't get that momentum going. And we are now right in the middle of identifying for each commodity in the procurement what we have to do next, so that also in our logistic chain we will have the necessary transparency, and also across the various logistic suppliers. For example, we conclude a contract with one supplier who has up to 200 trucks gas powered, and thus here will deliver with CNG powered trucks. Small building blocks, but nonetheless help us greatly to change our mindset. So with that, that's a bit of an extract from sustainability, electrification, autonomous driving at ZF. All of this, of course, coupled up with transformation and what we see in the supply chain, then you can see that we have quite a few challenges ahead of us. And with that, I'd like to switch over a bit to the supply chain and supply chain management, because we see that, of course, the transformation affects the supply chain, quite irrespective of what happened under the COVID pandemic or the semiconductor crisis. But switching from a conventional powertrain provider to the future also, of course, presupposes that you put a stress test on all suppliers and supply chains, because the products are changing, because products are being discontinued, new products are starting up, and that means, of course, that will have ripple-on effects that we will also notice. And I think semiconductors, I mean, the semiconductor crisis is something we all are noticing. Then, of course, steel prices, the increase in energy prices, the plastic crisis. I mean, I could go all the way through to floods in Germany. So I think every week, every fortnight, we are impacted by an event that we couldn't foresee as such yet. So what does that mean? What does that mean for our supply chain and for the bottlenecks in the supply chain? Well, we are thinking hard and fast how we can bring transparency into that supply chain. Because I think transparency here means transparency in real time. We need to be able to know at every time where a given part or component is to be found. We're far away from that yet at ZF. With 20,000 suppliers, and with all the parts, with a variety of parts, with over 60 sites worldwide, this is a huge challenge to achieve that transparency. But what's important for us, and here's a few examples here of these challenges, that we need to be the driver of this transformation, and that we want not to be driven, but we want to be the driver and want to affect our supply chain wherever we can. So today we must be able to know the CO2 emission of our entire supply chain, calculated, presented, report and documented. So our supply chain must be so transparent that over the components, packaging, delivery times, we have tangible, real-time ratings and values, and of course all of this paired with digitalized processes. And right now, we're doing so in collaboration with SAP for HANA. We've got a pilot project in Dillingen, in Wagenfeld, where we're starting up such a pilot phase, and will then successively roll this out globally across the entire production facilities. But we're also working with Catena X. We've got Supplion as a partner to look at the entire supply chain transparency, data mining and data assessment, so a host of activities, as you see. And a number of solutions are here, already visible, already deployed, but I don't dare to say that we have a lot. I would say the semiconductor crisis has been quite merciless to show what we don't have yet, and that's the transparency from the incoming order from the customers all the way to tier 3 and 4, and it's such a transparency that when you break down your component, you can control and manage the entire elements, and that you know where element 4.4 from tier 4 is actually then fitted in the end product that you forward to your customer. But we will achieve it. So the volatility, the insecurity in the markets, in the events that we're confronted with daily and weekly with, shall be balanced out, as I say, by our knowledge, a knowledge that helps us to be shored up by our own analytic tools, so that demand fluctuations, supply oscillations can be, as I said, balanced out. And with such a semiconductor crisis, you can imagine that, of course, we've driven up our inventory, not because we had to, but if you tell your sites that they need to maintain the delivery to their customers, that should not suffer under the crisis, then of course you open the floodgates. And then after 3 to 4 months, you've got a completely different problem, because then your inventory shoots up, but not all of these just triggered by the semiconductors, but also by other factors. So these are issues that we need to address with what I would call an overarching stock management tool. And we are just here talking not only about source make delivery from end-to-end process. So it's important and essential that we look at the entire process end to end, and here, shall I say, as close as possible into a fully digitalized process. And in this end-to-end observation, our partners are of course great help, especially when you look at the supply chain. But I am not going to address the individual items here on that slide. Then we've got a master plan for many other areas. We've got something for Industrial 4.0 for our plants. We've got a master plan for Supply Chain 4.0 for our plants and for our subordinate logistics And of course, this master plan is realized together with partners. End-to-end already mentioned, and we need a real-time transparency for all our components. Where are they right now? Where can they be checked? And equally central is, of course, that we have a supplier network as transparent as possible. Just imagine we've got 30,000 container shipments that we're turning over year by year. I mean, I could continue here with figures that are mind-boggling, but they all need to be managed. And so the entire value creation process needs to be fully managed. As I said, SAP S/4HANA is one thing here, and then with Microsoft we're developing a cloud solution, and we're also working together with other partners. But of course it's all a matter of having a standardization and a transparency over the entire group, and then to make sure to manage and optimize the flow of goods still further. And of course, next to it, you've got the capacities of the flow of goods, and another effect is, of course, well, that we also support digitally at the moment, that's CO2 ratings. How can we assess and rate them digitally? Where we're also working and talking with partners to have an automated solution in future, because when you look at an aluminum cast casing, then you want to know exactly what is the footprint of that aluminum cast housing. Another example here, that's from the global supply chain consignation process, where we're having elements shipped from China to Europe without that stock being with us, but the supply is actually with the goods are with the supplier. And then across all the various custom duty processes and the likes, you want to have the product at the end arriving in our factory, in our site, and then only when you actually assemble it, when you use it, only then will be fully acquired. So you see sea freight and the likes. These are individual components, but nonetheless components and elements, commodities, where we are already equipped with a pretty solid transparency. Another example is online tracking of, well, where we look at the entire transportation chain, so we can track the containers and get real-time information. Where are these goods right now? Something that we're just introducing with the containers, where we've got so-called tags, so that we always know where's that container in real time at the moment. And of course, our interest is clear. We want to know how and when will these goods arrive in our plants. That was a quick rundown. What is happening at ZF? As I said, transformation, and then, of course, as I said, the whole thing is also by, I would call them disruptions in the supply chain. For us, it started in February 2020. With the start of COVID, that we encountered disruptions in the supply chain, where we really, well, reacted quickly, because we had a month where we had 70% of reduced incoming orders, March and April. And of course, you all know how a company will answer to that situation. You put full metal to the brakes, and of course, also the OEMs put the brakes on, and it was a hard breakdown, so that October, November, we realized, hey, we've got a problem with semiconductors, and of course, you know that the semiconductor supply chain today can have up to 46, 50 weeks, almost a year in time lag, so if you want to affect anything from production to delivery. So these are issues that we're all looking at right now, how we will position ourselves in future, and this is, amongst others, one of the most important issues. And this semiconductor crisis, of course, meant that with other issues, you had oscillations, fluctuations in supply chain, so that in my little experience that I have, I can say what has happened over the last 2.5 years is something I've never seen before, but here we can see light at the end of the tunnel now. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've tried, within the 30 minutes that I have, to, well, take you along a little trip through ZF, and I hope I was able to do so. And just for you to note what keeps us moving, what keeps us awake, that is, of course, digitalization, the management and the transformation ahead of us, and that's what we're trying to convey. And with that, I say thank you for your attention.